Over the years, the mixed martial arts scene has been home to some of the most brutal fighters the world has ever seen. Sometimes, the aggression and brutality meant for the octagon leaks out into fighters' everyday lives, which leads to acts that land them in jail. Today, we'll be taking a look at UFC stars who somehow found themselves on the wrong side of the law. Jason Miller, or Mayhem Miller, is one of those fighters that most people remember not because of his time in the octagon, but rather what he did out on the streets. He was always on the wrong end of things, and by May 2012, his relationship with Dana White and the UFC had reached its last legs. After losing a fight to CB Dollaway at UFC 146, Miller was publicly fired by Dana White, which sent him spiraling down the rabbit hole. Before 2012, Miller had had some run-ins with the authorities where he was charged with assault and domestic violence, but he never really looked like turning a new leaf. He continued to engage in nefarious activities like domestic battery, burglary, and vandalism, but he always got off with a slap on the wrist. On August 21, 2020, Miller was arrested and charged with 2 felonies: first-degree burglary and grand theft auto. Miller was sentenced to serve 364 days at the Orange County Jail, with 2 years of probation upon release. Sometimes we see impressive fighters with a promising future in mixed martial arts throw their life away. And the case of Dmitry Sosnovsky is a sad one. This Russian fighter had an impressive 11-0 record, which led him to getting signed to UFC in 2016. And his first fight against Mark Godbeer was a resounding success. After winning the bout in 2018, most people expected great things from him, but were all shocked when he was released from the promotion and later arrested. Apparently, Sosnovsky and his crew thought it was a good idea to kidnap a businessman from Moscow, Russia, forcing him to pay a ransom. Fortunately for the businessman, Sosnovsky botched the kidnapping and he escaped and went on to report his ordeal to the police. For his troubles, Sosnovsky earned 8.5 years in a federal maximum security prison after being found guilty of kidnapping and extortion. Mike Whitehead is an MMA veteran who allowed the fame of being a fighter to get to him. The height of Whitehead's career came when he appeared on The Ultimate Fighter 2, even though his performance in the show was lackluster. After featuring on the Spike TV show, Whitehead went on to put on a disappointing performance at UFC 57, when he lost to Keith Jardine. After the horrid performance, he was released from the promotion, but that was the least of his worries. On April 14, 2010, Whitehead was arrested after a woman filed a report that he had sexually assaulted her at his home. As sad as it sounds, that was enough to put an end to Whitehead's career, and on September 12, 2011, he pleaded no contest to the charges. Mike Whitehead was later sentenced to 1 to 4 years in prison by the Clark County Jail. Jeremy Jackson is another former UFC fighter who made an appearance on The Ultimate Fighter 4. Jackson's last appearance in the octagon was in 2006, when he lost to Pete Spratt at Tough 4 finale via TKO in the second round. He had to be thrown off The Ultimate Fighter 4 when he thought it was a good idea to violate the rules by leaving the fighter house to meet a woman. It didn't work out so well for him, and on June 30, 2008, Jackson was arrested and taken into custody by the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. He pled guilty to robbing his ex-girlfriend's house and then raping her at fake gunpoint, landing him 25 years in a California prison. Griespy was one of the fighters the MMA world had its eyes on during the UFC-WEC amalgamation. He was on the cusp of glory, with a title shot against Jose Aldo looming. But an injury to Aldo scuttled the fight, and in what many considered a perilous gamble, Griespy took on Dustin Poirier instead. He lost the fight, and his status as the #1 contender was immediately clouded. What followed was one of the most incendiary falls from grace in the history of MMA. Griespy lost all 3 of his ensuing fights, and was shown the door. In 2014, Griespy successfully outdid himself in criminality. Griespy was arrested for what one police officer called the worst case of domestic abuse he had ever seen. Grisby punched and kicked his wife into a bloody mess before unleashing his pit bull on her. In June 2017, a grand jury found Grisby guilty on 7 charges, and he was sentenced to 5.5 years in jail and 5 years probation. Hermes Franca was one of the most ferocious and imposing lightweights of his day. With 6 ruthless finishes in as many fights, he was quickly snapped up by the UFC. And as with many before him, the ultimate proving ground revealed cracks in his game. But Franca would learn from his mistakes and rebound by winning the WEC lightweight belt. After 2 defenses, Franca vacated the belt and re-entered the UFC. The second chapter was much richer, with Franca winning 2 Fight of the Night awards and challenging for the 155-pound belt. Things took an unexpected turn in 2011 when Franca was arrested and charged with sexual abuse of a 14-year-old. He was imprisoned for 42 months and deported to Brazil with a 4.5-year probation. John War Machine Copenhaver is another UFC star who gained notoriety after assaulting former porn star Christy Mack and her boyfriend Corey Thomas. A Las Vegas jury found Copenhaver guilty of sexual assault, kidnapping, coercion, and 26 other counts. Copenhaver had a history of violence with several instances of street fights, with the physical assault of Mack and her boyfriend being the last straw. He couldn't deal with the fact that his time as Christy Mack's boyfriend was over, and it led him to going over the edge. After assaulting the couple, he spent 10 days on the run from the authorities. But he was eventually apprehended in Simi Valley, California, when he got into another altercation with a woman. After a heart-grueling trial, War Machine was sentenced to life in prison, with the chance of parole after 36 years are served. I know we've talked about some foul acts committed by mixed martial arts fighters, but the crimes of Jared Wyatt take things to a whole new level. Unlike regular athletes who like to hydrate with their favorite drink after a grueling training session, Wyatt thought it was a good idea to drink psychedelic mushrooms with his sparring partner Taylor Powell. Another friend, Justin Davis, who was present during the consumption of the tea, left because he found Wyatt's behavior worrying. When he returned, he got the shock of his life. Wyatt had cut out Powell's still-beating heart and burned it, believing that his friend had been possessed by the devil, and that was the only way to banish it. Wyatt was charged with first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 50 years in the state of California. The name Joe Son might not be as popular as it used to be, but it doesn't change the fact that Son fought in UFC way back in 1994. At a point in his career, Son appeared in several films, most notably as Random Task in Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. With a lackluster UFC career and dwindling job offers from Hollywood, Son was on his way heading for the path of washed-up UFC fighter. But then something shocking happened. In 2008, Joe Son was arrested for felony vandalism. As a condition of pleading guilty, Son was required to provide a DNA test to authorities. It was a mundane DNA test, but the results proved that Son was linked to the violent rape of a 19-year-old girl in Huntington Beach, California. With the evidence and statements from the victim, it was a simple trial, and Joe got life in prison for his behavior. According to California prison records, Son is currently serving his sentence at High Desert State Prison. Lee Murray's story should serve as a cautionary tale for those who just can't stay out of trouble. Murray had a brief stint with UFC that pales in comparison to his criminal activities. After getting stabbed and almost dying at the Funky Buddha nightclub in London, Murray's career was cut short. Murray was once touted as one of the best MMA fighters in the UK. But things took a turn for the worse when he was fingered out as one of the key figures in the Securitas Depot bank heist that took place in Kent, England, back in 2006. Murray had a tough life growing up, and he even had a history with minor criminal activities. But his discovery of mixed martial arts seemed to cure his itch for violence. On the 21st of February, Lee Murray and his crew kidnapped Colin Dixon, the manager of the Securitas Depot in Kent, England. With his family held hostage, Colin Dixon had no choice but to cooperate. At the end of the heist, Murray and his crew walked away with $63 million, making it one of the largest heists of all time. Murray fled to Morocco, but he was caught and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He later tried to escape prison, earning him 15 more years. With that, we've come to the end of today's video. What do you guys think of our list of MMA fighters who have been to jail? Let us know in the comments section below.